What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. I'd also like to thank our second sponsor this week, Martin, aka the Werewolf Guy, from the Hobby Horse in Taylorville, Illinois. If you're ever hanging out in Central Illinois, be sure to stop in for some good deals on Magic cards and to tell Martin hi. This week was the official release of the new Kamigawa set, so the Not Your Average Meta crew had a Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Showdown. First up, we have Gavin piloting the new Upgrades Unleashed Precon deck, which is led by Chishiro, the Shattered Blade. This deck looks to cast auras and equipment in order to pump up his commander, while he also creates an army of spirit tokens. Then we have Martin, aka the Wolf Guy, playing his freshly built Raiyuu Storm's Edge deck. This is a Boros Samurai Tribal deck that looks to take advantage of using the Samurai Tribal pumps along with his commander's multiple combat step ability. Next we have Justin, who refurbished his classic Yuriko the Tiger Shadow deck into a Satoru Umezawa deck. Much like Yuriko, this deck looks to get in attacks quick with unblockable creatures in order to ninjutsu in big creatures for more damage. Finally, we have Fogrel playing an upgraded version of the Buckle Up Precon deck, which is led by Kotori Pilot Prodigy. This is a Gundam mech suit vehicle deck that looks to get out and ride as many vehicles as he possibly can to victory. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Gavin plays a tapped Raging Ravine for turn and passes. Martin draws for turn and plays a tapped Castle Imrith. Justin draws and plays an island, paying 1 to cast Slitherblade. Fog draws and pays 2 life to play an untapped Hollowed Fountain, then pays 1 for a glorious turn 1 Soul Ring. Gavin draws for turn, then plays a mountain and passes. Martin draws for turn and plays a foil Plains that he's really excited about.
This is a Kamigawa foil Plains.
He then pays 2 to cast Aki Ronin. Justin plays a Swamp for turn, then taps it to pay 1 for a Sensei's Divining Top. Fog draws and plays an island. He then pays 4 to cast a Shourikai Genesis Engine. Gavin draws and plays a Forest for turn. He then pays 3 to play a Tarian Molar. Martin draws and plays a mountain before tapping out to cast Flame Discharge where X is equal to 2, in order to kill Justin's Slitherblade. He then goes to combat swinging his Ronin into Fog for 1 damage while using the ability to discard a card and draw a card. At the end of his turn, Justin pays to activate his top, looking at the top 3 cards of his library, then putting them back in any order. Justin then draws for turn and casts a Blighted Agent and passes. Fog draws for turn and plays a Waste. He then pays 3 for Forsake the Worldly to try to exile Justin's top. In response, Justin activates the top to draw a card, putting the top on top of his library. Fog then activates Shourikai to draw 2 cards, discard a card, and create a pilot token. Gavin draws and plays a Force for turn, then taps out to cast his commander, Chishiro, the Shattered Blade. Martin draws for turn and plays another Plains. He then pays 2 for Explosive Entry, destroying Fog's Shourikai, and then puts a +1/+1 counter on his Ronin. Martin then casts an Ancestral Katana before going to combat, swinging his Ronin at Justin for 2 damage. Justin draws his top for turn, then pays 1 to recast it before passing. Fog draws to start his turn, then plays a Plains. He then uses his Abundance of Mana to cast Board the Weatherlight, where he looks at the top 4 cards of his library and reveals an artifact, which is Ancient Den, then puts the rest at the bottom of the library in a random order. He then casts Thirst for Knowledge to draw an additional 3 cards, and then discards the Ancient Den that he found earlier. Gavin draws a turn, then plays another Forest. He then casts a pair of Swiftfoot Boots, which creates him a 2/2 Spirit token. Gavin then equips the boots to his commander and goes to his instep, putting a 1/1 counter on each of his modified creatures. Martin draws and goes to combat swinging his Aki Ronin at Fog. He then pays to equip his Ronin on attack with the Ancestral Katana. Fog then takes the hit for 4 damage, after which Martin pays to cast Noriko Yamazaki the Poet. At the end of his turn, Justin pays to activate his top, looking at the top 3 cards of his library and putting them back in any order. Justin draws and plays a Swamp for turn. He then taps out to cast his commander, Satoru Umezawa. Fogg draws and plays another island. He then pays 3 to cast Brute Suit, and then pays another 4 to cast Padim, Council of Innovation. Gavin draws for turn and plays an Opal Palace. He then casts Shamanic Revelation to draw 3 cards and gain 8 life. Gavin then goes to combat, swinging his Mauler Justin, who decides not to block and takes 13 damage. Gavin then ends his turn and puts a counter on his modified creatures. Martin draws for turn before tapping out to cast his commander Raiyuu. He then goes to combat, swinging his Ronin at Justin, who again takes the damage. Martin then untaps his Ronin off his commander's attack trigger, then takes a second combat step, attacking Fogg for 4 damage. Justin draws for turn, then goes to combat, swinging his Blighted Agent at Gavin. After Gavin declares no blocks, Justin then ninjutsus in a Moonsnare Specialist, who bounces the Mauler back to Gavin's hand. Justin then plays a Tap Beseju for turn and passes. Fogg draws 2 cards for turn and then plays a Buried Rune as his land for turn. He then pays to sack the Buried Rune in order to bring Shorakai back to his hand from his graveyard before recasting it. Gavin draws for turn and plays another land before recasting his Taurian Mauler. He then casts an Agitator Ant before going to his instep, putting a +1/+1 counter on his modified creatures. Martin draws for turn and casts Jessica's Will, getting 7 red mana and exiling the top 3 cards of his library. He then plays the Command Tower as his land for turn. Martin then casts a Fervor and also casts a Sigil of Valor. He then pays to equip the Sigil to his commander and pays another 3 to cast Rezona from his exile. Martin then goes to combat, swinging his commander Justin, who unsurprisingly takes the 8 commander damage. Martin then untaps his commander off his attack trigger and goes back to combat, swinging his commander at Fogg. In response, Fogg activates Shorakai, drawing 2 cards, discarding a card, and creating a pilot token that uses the chump block Martin's commander. Justin draws for turn and casts an Ornithopter. He then casts Kaido Shizuki, who he upticks in order to draw a card and discard a card. Justin then ends his turn and Kaido phases out. Fogg draws 2 cards for turn and plays a Deserted Beach before paying 4 to cast his homeboy, Scaretiller. He then pays 3 to cast his commander Kotori, Pilot Prodigy. Fogg then goes to combat and uses his commander to crew Shorakai and uses the Scaretiller to crew the Brute Suit. He then returns his planes from his graveyard to play off the Scaretiller trigger and targets Shorakai with the Kotori trigger. Fogg then swings Shorakai at Justin for 8 damage while he gains 8 life. Gavin draws and plays a Force for turn. He then pays to cast a Decimate, targeting Martin's Fervor and Commander, as well as Fogg's Padim and Deserted Beach. Gavin then pays to cast a Bear Umbra, attaching it to his Mauler. He then goes to combat and swings his Mauler at Martin while untapping all his lands. He then casts Hunter's Insight before damage is dealt in order to draw 12 cards while Martin takes 12 damage. Gavin then casts Sakura Tribe Elder and a Sword of Vengeance before passing. Martin draws and plays a second mountain for turn. He then pays to equip his Sigil to Rezana, while Gavin remembers to create Spirit Tokens. Justin phases Kaido back into play on his upkeep and then draws for turn. He then uptakes Kaido to draw and discard a card. Justin goes to combat and swings his Ornithopter at Gavin. After blocks aren't declared, Justin ninjutsus in Inguise. He then looks at the top 3 cards of his library off the Satoru trigger, putting 1 into his hand and the rest at the bottom of his library. Then after damage is dealt, he puts Gavin's Whiptongue Hydra into play from his graveyard and recasts his Ornithopter. At the end of his turn, Fogg then activates Shorakai, drawing 2 cards, discarding a card, and creates a pilot token. Fogg then draws for turn and plays an island. He then casts an Aeronaut Admiral, giving all his vehicles flying, and a Peace Walker Colossus. Fogg then goes to combat and crews the Brood Suit with the Scaretiller, returning a land to play from his graveyard. He then crews Shorakai with his commander again, targeting with his commander's ability. He then swings Shorakai at Gavin, dealing 8 damage while he gains 8 life. At the end of his turn, Gavin sacks his Elder to get a basic land into play tapped, while Martin flashes into Wandering Emperor to exile the Taurian Mauler. Gavin draws and plays a land for turn that taps 2 for an Arcane Signet. He then casts an Acidic Slime targeting Fog Shorakai. In response, Fog pays to activate Shorakai, drawing 2 cards, discarding a card, and creating a pilot token. He then lets him die. Gavin then plays Risk card, putting counters on a Spirit token, and then casts a Champion of Lambholt. He then goes to his end step, putting counters on all his modified creatures. Martin draws and recasts his commander before deciding who to attack.
Hey, if you swing at Brian, dude, I'll strongly consider Brian. Oh shit! I'm swinging at Brian. 7. So far it's. Oh, were you just kidding? Oh my god!
I gotta redo my math!
Oh my god!
I don't want to, hey, dude, that's not fair. That's not fair for the camera. He's gonna put it in the thing. I'm
7.
I'm a cheater basically, so I'm cheating again by.
I mean, it's not wrong. He is a cheater.
7 coming at Brian.
He then decides to attack Fog for 7, who blocks with a pilot token. Martin then untaps Rizona because of his commander's ability and then attacks Justin for 7, who blocks with a ninja. Justin then draws for turn and plays an island before uptaking Kaido, drawing a card and discarding a card. He then casts Servant Visions, drawing a card and scrying 2. Justin then casts Mistcloak Herald and a Key to the City. He then goes to combat, swinging his Ornithopter at Martin before ninjutsuing in an Azure Smoke Shaper, triggering his commander where he looks at the top 3 cards of his library, putting 1 into his hand and the rest of the bottom of his library. Martin then takes his 3 damage and Justin passes. Fog draws for turn, then casts Tameshi, Reality Architect, and 1 with the machine, drawing 4 cards. He then taps his commander to crew the Peace Walker and taps his Scaretilla to crew the Broodsuit. He then returns the land to play from his graveyard. Fog then attacks Gavin for 6 damage while he gains 6 life and Martin for 4. Gavin draws for turn, then casts a Bone Horde, creating a Spirit token, and equips a Bone Horde and the Sword of Vengeance to his commander. He then casts Fire Shrieker, creating another Spirit token, and then attaches the Fire Shrieker to his commander as well. He then goes to combat, swinging his commander at Fog, who in response casts Fair's Protection, phasing himself out of the game. Gavin then goes to his end step, putting a counter on his modified creatures. Martin draws for turn, then decides to swing out at Justin. Justin then blocks all the attacking creatures, and in response to blocks, Martin casts Ambitious Assault to draw a card. After damage is dealt, Martin then casts Jessica Thrice Reborn and downticks her to deal 1 damage to Justin, taking him out of the game. Fog draws for turn, then casts Generous Gift to destroy Gavin's Champion of Lambholt, giving him a 3/3 elephant. He then pays 5 to activate Tameshi, bouncing a land back to his hand, drawing a card, and returning Shorakai back to play from his graveyard. Fog then plays a Plains for turn before going to combat. He then uses his Scaretilla to crew his Broodsuit, putting a land from his hand into play, and uses his commander to crew the Peace Walker. He then attacks Gavin for 10 damage while he gains 6 life. Fog then casts Katsumara and passes turn. Gavin draws for turn to cast Tawashi, Guidebot, putting a +1/+1 counter on his elephant token. He then activates the Guidebot to draw a card, and then casts Primeval Protector to put a 1/1 counter on each of his creatures. Gavin then goes to combat, swinging his 2 4/4 Spirit tokens at Martin and his commander at Fog. Martin takes a damage, while Fog blocks what he can, but still dies to the commander damage because of Double Strike. Martin draws for turn and doesn't get an answer and concedes the game to Gavin. We got Gavin, the cheater here. That's his new moniker. Living for it. How does it feel to get a win in the pre-con game?
Hey, I didn't add anything to this deck. This is a sheer powered for $40 American. You too can be a cheater like me.
USDs.
USDs. So
He did add a card.
I did.
Come with double land.
I lied. I did
He
add.
actually covered both Mossfire Valleys, so he's actually disqualified.
Yeah. So I put an asterisk next to another win. Thanks for having me, guys. I can't wait to do it again. Cheat. If you're not trying, or you're not cheating, you're not trying. So.
Cheat and steal, baby.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.